house like this could probably build in a cottage village, but the ideal location is when there's nothing but forest, water, the Volga's pouring in for almost 2 kilometers, an area of glass over 100 square meters. Each log is like a sculpture, its own relief, its own plasticity, its own shape. 2 years ago, this house burned down overnight. We took over the whole thing to rebuild this house. Now all this construction is happening at our Artkelo expenses. Beautiful lots deserve to have beautiful homes built on them. Donald Trump says, the most important thing in real estate is location and location again. I'm not really agreeing what Donald Trump is saying, but it's hard to argue with that in here. It's a very important part of this house. A house like this could probably be built in a cottage village, and it could even be built in some other places, maybe more populated. But the ideal location when there's nothing but woods around the house, water, and maybe it would be nice if there were mountains. There aren't any mountains, but there's a lot of water here. The Volga rivers flow through here for almost 2 kilometers. The pine forest is close by, and this house built of cedar 80 centimeters in diameter, and in some places even 1 meter 20 centimeters in girth. Traditional American-Canadian Post&Beam technology. Post&Beam in essence. There are 2 types of houses. It's a log house, and then there's timber frame, which is also log with a large cross-section. Framed in essence. House that have one very powerful advantage. Such a house requires no shrinkage, which is very important for larger houses. That's why almost all big houses with square footage of 500, 600, 800 and a few thousand square meters can be built with this technology. Only the diameter of the log is changed. The larger the size of the house, the larger the log diameter is required. The logs form the feeling as if it's a log house, but it's actually a frame house. It's the logs that carry the structure. I mean, these huge logs in this case are up to 10 meters high. They are supporting structure. They have no shrinkage problems. So a house like this can be easily built in a single construction season, finished and ready to live in. Most of these houses are in Canada, in the US and in Russia. Not a few houses are already been built in post-beam technology. We think that for big houses it is a very interesting technology. That's why we want to talk more about it. Let's go take a look inside, stage by stage. We'll tell you about all the key elements we think is important to take into account in the process of designing of such a house. We appreciate and are very interested in your comments, your observations. Please let us know exactly what you would be interested in, what you like this approach, what you don't like. We will aim to respond as much as possible to your questions. If you are interested in building post-beam technology, you will, I'm sure, also be interested in the design of this particular house. We can send it to your WhatsApp number. Please leave it in the comments or text us in direct. We'd be happy to share this project, and we will of course gladly discuss the possibilities of building such a house, by a large account, anywhere in Russia or outside of Russia. I think any place, on a lake shore, river, in the mountains, a beautiful wooded area, we strongly recommend you to consider about such a house. Because beautiful plots deserve to have beautiful houses built on them. Follow us, subscribe to our channel, we want to be of service to you. There's even this rafter. It is no longer a board, but a timber. The board of 50 by 200 are commonly used, but in all roof standard practically. Here we use 100 by 200 because the cross-section allows you to safely, securely lean all the roof structures, even on large spans. These are the big ones here. Of course, and to work, to lift a bar like this is already required 2 men on the bottom of the feet, 2 people from the top, on the receiving of that bar. That like this. Technology Post&Beam suggests that we use standard windows as little as possible, maximize the use of stained glass, which is essentially directly mounted, as if in a log, but you can't say they were mounted straight into the log. The log is drying less on the outside and more on the inside, so mount it anyway to a separate structure. This separate construction is now mounted on such grouse, and what's in it in the depths, the log abutment, will be insulated. So it's going to be a very warm and efficient structure and very sleek. Mounting the insulating glass unit is a separate story. That's what we're talking about too. We'll show you, stay tuned. We're very focused on to show you how to do. And all of our technology solutions have been proven by a decade of practice in North America, Canada, including the regions with a climate very similar to ours. In that sense, it's very important and valuable that here is the Volga. The temperature can reach minus 35 degrees, cold wind is blowing even now. The sun is already shining, but I'll tell you, it's not so warm here, because there is the cold wind blowing in from the Volga. That's why the glass connection is a very important element, so there is no blowing, no heat loss. You wouldn't say yes, but cedar is a soft material. Judging by the way it clamps, it's not soft at all. Relative to pine, in fact, relative to larch, cedar is the softest, the most malleable material. For that, we're also very fond of it. Carpenters, craftsmen say it is a malleable texture. Generally, a lot of men like skirts, including ones like this. That's what it's called, skirt, or the rump. It's the base of the barrel, and to get a skirt like that, it takes a lot of work. Because you have to dig up the trunk of the tree, and to do this sawing with a huge chainsaw. The diameter of the skirt can be up to 1 meter, 1 meter 20 centimeters, 130, and even 1.5 meter. Here, the diameter of this skirt is 1 meter 20 centimeters, and it's shaped very picturesquely. Of course, imitable, natural, organic. A lot of people like this shape, and it's very much to our liking. A very important point. The cedar, when it is already of great age, of large diameter, the process of shriveling begins inside. The wood inside is beginning to loosen, to rotten very often. The skirts are wide, they're flat. The center part is empty, like a hollow. Sometimes, to eliminate this flaw, a chainsaw picks out a seal, like this. A new hard, dense shaft is inserted, and such a fragment already looks better than when there is a hole in it. Or did I tell you about some problematic moment? But really, that plasticity, that beauty that this material has, it certainly outweighs it. By the way, in the Altai, in the dried pine, you don't see a lot of it. Only part of Alta's bases is almost never used, all because too close to the ground. And again, the trunk is often rotten. Here, as it's not a dry wood, and this is natural wood moisture, that is, tree is still alive, is being sawn off. Here it's found very rare, but it does occur. In nature, the trunk is much smoother, flat. In fact, we give it such an expressive texture by shaping it as if it were muscle. And at the expense of these extra grooves, the surface becomes even more shapely, even more textured, three-dimensional. It's not the final result. There will still be additional processing, sanding, plating. It's still a little bit blackish, dirty now. In fact, with our production site from the Altai, delivered, assembled still without any processing. There are more grinding processes ahead. We will definitely tell you about it because it's a very important point. Look at the stages. These are the important ones that you don't want to miss in order to get a house that will truly delight you and your loved ones. Go on. The combination of wood and stone, in many ways, is understated theme, and here it feels that way. When you have such a brutal stone surface combined with the same powerful brutal log surface, it is very cool. Maybe I'd even use a wilder and less urban, but that's the format the customer chose. Speaking of which, what do you think? How much do you like these sack stuffed? How good do they look? Of course, we see for sure when the facade of the house will be finished, but it's already clear that it looks quite convincing, such a stone belt. So let's probably start at the base of the house. The oval part, it survived the fire. In fact, that's all you see, this rocky part of the bottom, is what survived the fire. The fire completely destroyed the entire upper section, and here's the wooden part below. The boiler room, the engineering stuffing of the house and the stone part is preserved. Let's go take a look. Although it's only basement, and normally basement floors they don't do panoramic glazing. But here we have a view that certainly makes it impossible to refuse. It's going to be the gym. there will be a spa area. The views here are quite advantageous. Note that there is a minimum clearance of 20 meters from the water, in accordance to the water regulations, but still at the expense of the fact that there's nothing planted by the water. Direct view opens up. I think for the plots that are directly beside the water, I'd guess that this wise to keep the plantings to a minimum. Works on this foundation started with the excavation of the pit. There's sandy ground here. But still we've made provisions for drainage, integrated drainage directly into the foundation. The design is certainly quite powerful. That is the slab over 350 mm thick, with a double reinforcing frame. Then there are the monolithic walls, which are lined with brick with insulation, with waterproofing, followed by a stone finish. And a monolithic slab, which already forms the base for the wooden part of the house. All of the columns are anchored to the metal, shaped custom elements, which in turn are supported by reinforcing bars. There's a full monolithic framework here. The foundation structure is designed to point loads specific to Post&Beam design. It's also very important, because in Post&Beam, essentially the entire load of the house rests on just 2 dozen pylons. So the house weighs hundreds of tons, resting on just a few points. At each point, the load can be as much as several tens of tons. This is very important in the planning of monolithic foundations. Let's move on. Let me tell what the wooden frame looks like, how it's arranged, how it's attached to the structure of the plinth floor, and how it will all be working structurally and also aesthetically. Let's go! Every log here is essentially like a sculpture. Some girl would be like this. Look, I got it! I can hold the barrel like that! And the boy will ask how is it possible, what weightlessness is all about. Every log is like a sculpture. Its own relief, its own plasticity, its own form. That's how it's going to be the timbers, but the house will look like at the end. This canopy, this is a cardboard. It's 2 years old. It didn't burn down. The house burned down and he was very close though. It didn't burn up, it just had to be repaired a bit of roofing and that's it. You can see here how beautiful and how finished the house is. The finish, how elaborate it was. What do you think? What do you think of this combination? Shapely logs and larch, smooth even, without any texture. I would also consider a canopy to have our favorite open rafter system. The thing is, it's very common when big eaves are made. Then additionally very cool when there is open rafter system, which gives it a certain rhythm, a certain pitch in this construction. Not here. The whole plane of the roof is smooth, flat. The plank is large without nuts. What do you think? If there was an open rafter system and more shaved boards, would that have been interesting? Or it'd be too much and shapely logs are enough? I don't know. Here, looking at it, I can't get enough of it. It's the combination of the plasticity of the shapely nuts, no articulated notches, faceted joints. It's certainly very pretty. There's such a combination of natural texture here, even though it's not very natural, but a man-made texture. And a faceted, linear, made enough precisely defined elements. Speaking of which, it's interesting that all the elements of this house were made without a control assembly at the production site. So they all have been miscalculated, plotted so precisely, in such a way that they didn't need to be collected in production beforehand. It's like glued beam houses, by the way. They were coming out of the machines, already with a hexa, the right ones in the right places, and they are not assembled in the factory. They're taken directly to the construction site and assembled there. And so here, in fact, in some kind of a good way, factory technology. Everything is made according to the blueprints, marked, here already assembled, exactly based on the model the architect's office had. Let's move on. Let's see what else interesting is going on here. Very important in Post&Beam technology is to be proportionate. When you have a log with a diameter of 80 centimeters, it's important that the ledge protrudes by proportionate distance to that log. it turns out to be about 2 meters, sometimes even 2.5, and in some cases 3 meters out of the ledge. We've encountered situations where it was not observed when the eaves were made to a length of 1 meter, 1 meter 20 centimeters, very unconvincing. That's why it's a very important component, to maintain that proportion as well. And now let's speculate as to why do we need such large diameters? What if we took it more economically? There's a diameter of 30 centimeters, maybe 35, and make a house out of it Post&Beam. Will it turn out the way you want it to? Will it be beautiful or will it be a problem? On our view, actually, if the house is built by Post&Beam technology, even if it's not that big, it's impossible to build from a log with a diameter, let's say, 30-35 centimeters. Here's why. In the middle belt of our country, the normative thickness of the insulation that required to keep the house warm retain normative values are 20 centimeters. 20 centimeters effective insulation, that's the minimum that we should have, plus trim, a minimum of 2 centimeters. Even if it is the most minimal trim on one side, 2 centimeters on the other, that adds up to 24 centimeters. Let's have a look here specifically. 20 centimeters slot. That's about how thick the insulation will be here. Additional trim, and it turns out that there's not much distance to the next groove. So, if we were to take the smaller log, there'd be that much left. This much, maybe this much. That would be completely ugly and unconvincing. So it turns out that in order to build Post&Beam, whether you want to or not, minimum 60 centimeters, preferably 70 or 80 centimeters. And if the house is big like this, then maybe the minimum is 80 centimeters plus. Which is interesting is that the dodger is that we're going to put on the wall. Can be completely different. Could be filled in here even a brick. Can be filled in here with some other insulation. Some even use straw, some uses just sufficient insulation, and then stucco. We are of course fans of wood, and there's going to be used log, half a log here, half log here. But the house itself, its thermal efficiency, is provided by insulation. That is, the wood in this case is just essentially decorative element, on the outside and on the inside. You can play around here if, for example, we have the wet area. Then there's no need to make a log. You can leave the frame partition, trim with ceramic tile. On the exterior, the all walls will, of course, be finished with logs. There are other approaches. I wish to ask if there would be plaster, or if there was a stone trim. How would it look to you? We'll show you how it's done from the catalogs of American companies. How they do it. How they combine logs and stucco. Logs and stone. We interested in your opinion. Do we need experiments like this, wood and stone houses? Or better to have it be pure wood? I want to talk about an important detail, about the difference between red Canadian cedar and of our Altai cedar. It's worth about 5 times lower than if it was Canadian cedar. Red Canadian cedar is a tree looking something like a cypress actually, and a very shapely surface. The shape of the log, it's roughly like this, so it's not just a smooth log, but with this sort of stripes, notches. Here we've imitated the structure, so it's hand-drawn. Well, more precisely with a chainsaw, a particular tool with the attachment on the chainsaw. And then there's a characteristic about cedar, is that the outer surface, sapwood, it's white, and the inner is another color. That's a reddish color. It's basically cool. I mean, it appears an extra pattern like this on the log. You have to understand that this is different from the original Canadian story, when you have a naturally shapely trunk, and not thanks to the hand of the master. But agree, if for example, you were offered the house like this, that's a fact by the way, a Canadian company has offered to manufacture such a house. Excluding delivery and customs, it cost $1 million. Just the wall set. In Russia, the manufacture of such a wall set is at least 4 times cheaper. It's probably a compromise, but I think it's an acceptable compromise. And for having these striped ginger, well, it's hardly worth overpaying for several tens of millions rubles. But of course, there may be different opinions here on this subject. We're interested in your opinion, whether the strip is worth 40 million or whether you can compromise. If we're sitting at the table or on the couch, we can no longer see the ground. So you're sitting right there on the couch. It's like your house is floating on water. Crazy effect. This is where you can get very clear how easy and effortless it is to combine in Larch home technology Post&Beam brick wall. It will be finished with stucco in the future and ceramic tiles. This will be the bathroom. Very important in a house like this, install heat-efficient window constructions. The area of glass on this house, over 100 square meters. One living room by itself is already 50 square meters of glazing. A very important point to defend here not only from the cold, but also from the heat on the summer, from the sun. That's why the developments of such insulating glass units are a realistic engineering challenge. I'm in a bedroom right now. The view behind me is incredible. Around me is an octagonal drainage frame. And with 8 lugs, made into a wedge. With the center, very nicely shaped log. It's kind of a forest. Really, there will be a minimum of walls. Mostly here there's gonna be glazing. I think it's gonna be almost perfect bedroom. Every man's dream. I can only envy to our customer. We have a standard roof here. It doesn't stand out in any way. Roofing pie, classic vapor barrier, insulation, waterproofing, buttons, counter buttons, and soft roofing. Hi to Igor Rybakov. Mostly we're using Chronicle materials here. Can you please tell me if you have any thoughts on this subject? Is it worth using any import ones, expensive technological solutions, or in your opinion Chronicle is the optimal solution, which is now become more and more popular in a way? Most construction sites now are construction sites with using Chronicle technology. I think it's time for us to tell we've pretty much got over this difficult situation. And the difficult situation was that 2 years ago, the house was in this condition. A complete finished, glazed, we were ready to begin the interior finished. At which point, I remember as it happened, I got a WhatsApp message from my brother, our technical director. I read it this morning and thought I should probably still get some sleep, because I'm not ready to absorb this information. The information was that this house burned down overnight. That means that several dozen million rubles we need to find to rebuild this construction, because we are the general contractor. Hence, everything that happens on the construction site during the construction is our full organizational and financial responsibility. I'm here, by the way, to point out that a lot of people underestimate it and tend to hire someone separately, who does foundation, walls, roofs, heating, electrics, stoves. I'm 100% sure that in the long run, no matter how he thinks he will save money, in the long run he will lose. He is going to lose time, because he will then be looking for those who are at fault for this or that situation. Situation can be different. Even blaming seemed to be nothing to blame, because it's not like anyone fell asleep with a cigarette. Not that anyone used a sloppy fire, a welding torch machine, torch, absolutely no. No fire hazardous work was carried out. All that was needed to change the battery, to move from one place to another place, to rehang. And to do that, it was necessary to cut the thin brackets on which this battery was fastened to, and remove the battery. And while using an ordinary bolt cutter, cut off this tiny little bracket. In huge giant house, a microscopic spark went inside of the insulation. And the insulation of this house was custom, environmentally friendly. Wool. Ordinary insulation wouldn't catch fire, of course, stone cotton. But wool, it caught fire. And it caught fire inside the slab. No one saw it right away. Already it was evening, everyone went to dinner. And when we saw that it was like the lights were on, it wasn't the light, it was the beginning of the fire. It was getting late, and the house in several hours was completely burned out. All that was left was this stone part. The losses are tens of millions of rubles. We have been entirely taken care of. It's a shame to insure a house like this, actually impossible. The customer had plans to insure the house, but in order to do so, the house needed to be fully glazed. We had it glazed, and in 2 weeks, we haven't had time to insure it yet, it's happened. So anything can happen. And our basic advice is, for the builders, save your reserves. It helped us, but we were saving up reserves. The reserves, of course, we were mostly saving up for development purposes. We were planning an expansion production capacity. Unfortunately, those plans had to be postponed, but we saved our face. We totally took on the rebuilding of this house to its original conditions. And now this whole construction is taking place at our own expense. Well, a word of good advice for the customers. Anything can happen at the construction site, and you have to conclude the contract with a company that can withstand, among other things. Even despite the events, global financial crisis, another unique, totally unprecedented, the coronavirus, we continue to build. Be sure to give us likes or dislikes as you want. Subscribe to our channel. We can send you the design of this house, if you're interested. And of course, we're willing to discuss building one or such a house. We've already hit the ground running in all sorts of places, and we really understand the nuances, which from here may even seem like inconspicuous, not visible, but they're very valuable. So once again I remind you, send your WhatsApp number or email, we will send you this project. And we can discuss the possibilities, if necessary, of building such a house at any point of our country, and even beyond. Because that's the kind of house I think is worthy of being built on the mountains, at the banks of lakes, rivers, and any scenic spots, whatever it is. We'd be happy to tell you further about the construction of some incredibly interesting and unique, truly beautiful homes. See you later, friends!